Let's talk about a little bit of this new reporting, Dara, specifically going after green card holders. How is the administration trying to justify that according to the reporting?
So this is something that they've actually done previously earlier this year with people who had been settled as refugees, saying, well, we're now going to go back and reopen your case because we think there might have been fraud here. We think it might have been, improvidently granted. So we're going to re-vet it. In this case, honestly, we're looking at a fairly, if you can see, we're looking at a fairly small scope of things, right? Like this is not something where everyone who has a green card in the United States is going to be hauled back in for an interview, is going to be hauled into detention. What's really remarkable, of course, is that you're putting an entire unit out just to target 50 people, right? That it's about the resources that they're spending on that, as opposed to processing the green card applications that USCIS, which is responsible for, adjudicating these applications, currently has. It's an expression of them trying to use the legal immigration system to have there be fewer legal immigrants.
So what is the goal here? Is it the number? If the number is fewer legal immigrants, I guess you just answered that question pretty clearly. There's 50 or so that they're trying to go after, but by putting all of that effort onto that cause specifically and ignoring the people who are applying, you automatically lower the number of immigrants. Is this going to be a better strategy for this administration? They had been going after people on the street, was not working. Is this a quieter and potentially more effective strategy?
I mean, they're doing both at once, right? This is the agency that's responsible for, for looking at immigration applications is different from ICE, the agency which is doing the enforcement. So they can, in theory, do both. Of course, both of these have something of the same thing at root, which is it doesn't matter if you have legal status in the United States. We're going to arrest you first. We're going to treat you as a suspect first and ask questions later. And that feeling that people who have all their papers in order, who actually do have legal status, that doesn't protect them from being swept up by ICE or having their status questioned by the government. It's that kind of insecurity that is really a problem for immigrants trying to make decisions about how safe they feel in the U.S.
So, Mike, what does it do functionally for those who are already here and are now worried?
Well, I think politically this has been a fiasco, and that I think is the real problem. It was just pointed out what we're talking about in terms of the real life impacts of this policy, this narrow specific policy. We're not talking about a large number of people, and that really, I think, points out to the dilemma that the administration finds itself in. They have turned one of their greatest strengths politically into an extraordinary weakness, and they've drawn themselves into this place where their policy is incoherent. It doesn't make any sense. They're trying to say we're not doing mass deportations while they're still trying to effectively engage in a mass deportation policy. And it gets back to what you said in the intro, which is this extraordinary loss of trust. So at 41%, this is really one of the lows that Donald Trump is at in terms of his approval ratings with the American public on what has always been a core issue. And if you look at the 2018 midterms, his first midterms, this same old song and dance is what they were trying to do to stop what ended up being a blue wave. That blue wave seems to be much, much bigger. His support levels for immigration are lower and the economy is heading south. So there's no good way out of this cul-de-sac that they've driven themselves into.
It's interesting because in 2018, they were talking about the caravan. Yes. That was coming over, and that was scaring everybody. There's a caravan of immigrants coming for the United States. Be nervous about it. Donald Trump is going to stop it. They were trying to use that. The approach this time appears to be a little bit different. Let me read this from the Wall Street Journal. Mullen has told associates, this is the new cabinet secretary, ahead of November, his primary marching orders are to lower his agency's profile and avoid bad press so the issue of immigration recedes in the public consciousness, according to people familiar with the matter. Polls show voter approval of Trump's handling of immigration to have declined, and the president has told advisors that some of the previous team's moves went too far. So if you just take it out of the headlines and you don't put it in people's faces the way they did in January in Minnesota, does it become a better issue once again for this administration?
No. It goes away as an issue. And this is one of the things that Donald Trump has done since he got into politics back, in the formal way back in 2015 when he was running for president. He's made immigration a very central issue to his campaigns. He has dialed up unique issues, things that you would never have thought would rise to the level they did, Springfield, Ohio, stuff like that. And he is, whether you like him or not, a master communicator. So he's been able to do that. Here, if you have his own people and relatively skilled folks saying, yeah, we're going to dial it down, I mean, is he going to be in competition with folks who are trying to take it off the radar while he tries to put it on? The final thing I'll throw in the mix is this, too. In the previous hour, there was a report on farm bankruptcies. And that may seem off radar for this. It's not. In a lot of rural America, the concern about immigration policy, this sense that it could rise up at some point or become another flashpoint, has become a real challenge for farmers and other folks who do rely quite often on immigrants to help them do their work. And so this is an issue that now people, I think, understand in a deeper sense. And when it rises, it doesn't necessarily help Donald Trump in the same way that it did in the past.
So even if he's not saying specifically, I'm going to go after immigrants that might be working in these fields, at these farms, there's still a base level nervousness there that even by approaching it in a big way, they're going to have a harder time doing business?
They've had this experience, right?
Yeah.
There is the question of people...
So they don't trust the administration any longer, is what you're saying.
They may trust the administration on other issues. These may be very conservative voters. They may be inclined. But immigration is not necessarily going to be the issue that drives them. And when you're a president and you're trying to rally your base in key areas around the country in a midterm, and you're this far into it, and you're talking about things that are driven toward your base, if your base isn't going to get excited by that, where do you go? How do you make it work for you?
John was saying something that I think is interesting regarding Donald Trump. He's always been very skilled at communicating, Mike, his priorities. He's been very good at reading the room and knowing what people want to hear. He's been elected twice to the presidency on that, and immigration was one of the main issues. We have not heard him talk about it much lately, yes, but if he does start talking about it ahead of the midterms, despite what Mark Wayne Mullen might want, does he still have that power to convince Americans that he has a handle on immigration, that he's making them safer?
I do not think that he does. I think he has that handle over a dwindling share of his own base, and that's why he does it. Midterm races are, especially for the party that requires a greater turnout, which the Republicans now do, are base elections. The problem is the Republicans considered this growing Latino vote that was moving in their direction, which I wrote about in the Latino Century. They believed that that was a new base, and there's no evidence to suggest that that was the case. There's more disaffection from the previous administration than it was falling in love with Donald Trump. So they've miscalculated. And even if they were successful in getting some more of this base vote, there's a turnout question that they're facing. So all of this is proving very problematic for them. And the truth of the matter is, most Americans don't view this as a really big issue in terms of a top priority the way they did in November of 2024, because the border has been essentially secured. The undocumented crossings are not anywhere near where they were. So I guess if you want to say it's been a success in that terms, what it's also done is had the effect of taking this issue off of the table for Republicans as a mobilizing issue. So even where he has had some policy successes, it's hurting him, damaging him incredibly politically. So again, there's just very few options to do this the right way. And I think what you mentioned in 2018 is a great apt comparison. It's just not looking good for them right now.
Yeah, they're not currently trying to use a caravan coming at us in the same way. They had been using the striking of the drug boats to warn against immigration and what's coming into this country. But even that wasn't working as they expected it to. Dara, we're talking about what might happen ahead of the midterms. What about what happens after the midterms in terms of immigration when Donald Trump is no longer running for re-election and Stephen Miller potentially has his last 2 years this close to the presidency?
I mean, during this entire conversation about trying to lower the salience of the issue, I was wondering, how on earth they kept Stephen Miller out of the room when that decision was being made, because his entire playbook, as we've mentioned, is to continue to convince the American people that immigrants are coming to kill them. So I wouldn't say that we are necessarily going to see Trump unleashed after the midterms, because what we're seeing right now is already an executive branch that feels, despite today's headlines, that generally seems to act as if political gravity does not apply to them. But I think that there are certainly, as they get more into the swing of all of the money that Congress gave them last year, as they get more into the swing of this new detention plan to centralize things and make it much easier to deport people once they're in detention, that we might see some scaling up or some kind of consolidation that will make it look like a more efficient and more complete operation than the kind of here and there that we've seen over the last year.
Do you expect it to result in more off-the-street pickups, Dara? Go back to maybe what we saw in Minneapolis. I mean, again, Stephen Miller is still there. Donald Trump's instincts are still there. Do you expect that what we saw in Minneapolis we're not going to see again?
I think it's really too soon to say, because we don't really yet know how much they've been able to, how many people they've been able to bring into the system through a kind of lower profile. You arrest people at their check-ins, or you take people into custody who have been pulled over for having a broken taillight, that sort of thing, which is not as high profile, but can, in theory, net higher arrest numbers. They've been a little bit bottlenecked in terms of detention capacity, deportation capacity. So it's hard to know if that's why arrests are down a little bit, or if it's they aren't getting the kind of numbers that they want. Numbers really do run this administration's approach to immigration enforcement. And if we keep seeing arrests down, then yeah, I think that there's going to be an effort to bring those back up to continue to make people feel concerned. But I think that the bottom line, frankly, is that there's no world in which people look at the number of immigration arrests going down and go, oh, I'm safe now. Oh, ICE isn't going to pick me up if I'm taking my kids to school. That damage has been done. And frankly, we're looking at years in terms of rebuilding the trust that communities have in terms of letting people just step outside safely without worrying they're going to be taken from their children.